on the side of him, he fell down and he got shook. And I just stood on top of him, grabbed him, and next thing you know, NYPD was there.
Okay, so that situation happened. And then a bit after that, in Atlanta, Suge's best friend, Big Jake, gets killed in a club. And this part's kind of fuzzy, but there was a rumor that Wolf was the one that did it. Puffy got blamed for it and so forth. But I guess Wolf wasn't the one who did it, but still there was some sort of blame that Suge had on Bad Boy over that situation, right?
I don't know if Suge had blamed Bad Boy for that because the situation never came, when I got with him, the situation never came to us like that. Now, I've heard Wolf talk about it, and Wolf told me personally that he didn't do it. And I know everybody knew the guy who did it. It was this dude, he's dead now. He got killed in Atlanta about 2 or 3 years ago. His father was from the Bronx and he owned the cleaners. Now, did Wolf and them know him? Yeah, they probably knew him. He was from the Bronx, his part of town. His father owned the cleaners. They knew this guy. You understand? Him and Jake was arguing over this chick or whatever. Now, did Wolf do it? How could Wolf do it when he was next to Suge? He was right next to Suge when Jake got killed. But everybody want to say Wolf did it because that glamorized the situation.
Right. Okay. And then after that, Wolf actually reached out to you and asked you to come back to Bad Boy and help out with security.
Well, I told Wolf he had to straighten out his thing with Slick. We met on 125th Street, me, Slick, Rico, and Wolf. Him and Slick talked and everything, and it was cool and everything. So he said, yo, Gene, I need you to come because we need somebody who was in law enforcement or legal that could carry a gun and everything to be with us. He said, and if you ran after me, and this was his own words, because I didn't see it and I didn't know it at the time. You know, he said, if you ran after me and I had a gun in my hand, I want you on my team. I said, I don't fuck with Puff like that, bruh. He said, from the city college here. He said, yo, you're gonna have your own contract. You're gonna have your own days. All you gotta do is listen to me and make sure he good. I said, all right, man, we'll see. And that's when I went back.
Okay, so you joined the security team at Bad Boy with your own contract.
Right.
And Wolf was already over there, and Big Paul was over there as well.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, Paulie. And Paulie was kind of Puffy's everyday guy?
Yeah, Paul was the guy who Puff helped him set up a security company, had him set up a security company. So he did the security at the house, the apartment building or whatever, and Sean John, and over at Bad Boy and the studios. So he set up all the security for those places.
Roger Bonds, Diddy's former head of security, has revealed some shocking details about Diddy's interactions with Suge Knight, which will make you question everything you thought you knew about the hip-hop mogul.
I did was Puff.
Okay, and I guess every so often, Puffy will put you with Big during certain events and so forth, right?
Well, like if we was on stage or Big was on stage, he felt threatened for Big, I guess. He said, yo, Gene, go watch Big. I said, all right, cool. It wouldn't matter.
Okay, so you doing some work for Biggie, did the two of you kind of form a relationship?
I think me and Big we formed a relationship on 2 occasions. One, when we was in DC doing Howard University. He made Puff shut the door down, and the people shut the door down, and it was D-Rock. I think D-Rock's birthday is the 17th, mine is the 16th of October, and he made him shut down the place, and just me and D-Rock bought like 5 outfits together, and then everybody else bought an outfit. And then Big used to just give me all the clothes that he didn't want. Like, you know, you had Nike, Lugs, you had Mecca clothing line. They would bring big boxes to Big everywhere he was at. And then he was like, yo, whatever he didn't want, he'd say, yo, D-Rock, you want this? D-Rock was like, nah, I don't want it. He said, yo, Big Gene, you want it? And then I was like, man, I'll take it and give it to the guys on the block, you know, who was with our part of our crew or whatever. But the kid was just good like that. And then we had a situation when we were in Atlanta that something was bought, and he thought I was gonna lie about it because Puff was trying to say it was his, and it wasn't his. It was Big's. And you understand? And when he said, and they had made a bet that I was gonna go on Puff's side. So when I got to the studio, I said, nah, Puff, you had that one, and Big had that one, and that's what it was. And Big looked at me, and you could see a smile in his face like, yo, this nigga's honorable.
Okay. And before all the drama began, did Tupac ever come around? Did you ever see Big and Tupac interact together?
No, I never seen Big and Tupac interact together. I seen Puff and Pac interact together, but I didn't see
really?
Big, yeah.
In what capacity?
Like we was at Roxy. They used to give functions and parties there. And then one time me and Puff walked up in there. It was, this was after Pac got shot and everything like that. And it was Pac and like 4 other guys. And Pac put a cigarette in his mouth. The dude lit the cigarette. I started laughing. I was like, who the fuck like a cigarette for? Like that. So then him and Puff talked, and that was it. Was nothing.
Okay, and then the incident happened at Quad Studios.
This was after the incident at Quad, when I seen Pac with Puff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when the
Picture this, it's 2010 and Diddy, the face of Bad Boy Records, is living his life as usual, late-night burger cravings, luxury cars, and an entourage that makes him seem untouchable. But behind the glitzy image lies a story that reveals how even the biggest stars can be vulnerable. According to Roger Bonds, one night Diddy's sudden craving for a burger led to an intense, unexpected encounter with none other than Suge Knight, the infamous CEO of Death Row Records.
Diddy Combs has been denied bail in connection with the sexual abuse and sex trafficking charges he faces. And as Les Trent reports, the music mogul who once traveled by private jet to all those mansions is now in a jail that is notorious for its bad living conditions.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs spent his first night behind bars inside a facility that is being called Hell on Earth. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn is notorious for its appalling living conditions and rampant violence. How bad is it inside this federal lockup? There have been 2 murders, 4 suicides, and numerous stabbings and lockdowns in recent years. It's so out of control inside that 4 federal judges are reportedly refusing to send any more prisoners here. Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, spent a harrowing year in federal custody. He says for someone used to a life of luxury like Diddy, prison life is a severe shock.
You have a desk, you have a plastic chair, you have your bed with a 1.5-inch mattress, no pillow, and you also have a locker. So you basically have 3 feet by 5 feet to move around. So you have a basic 15 square feet. It is a horrible, horrible place.
Diddy's lawyers were so eager to keep him out of jail, they offered his palatial $48 million home in Miami Beach and his private jets as bail. Today, they are even offering to restrict female visitors to his homes, except for his mother, daughters, and the mothers of his children if he is released. They told the judge the jail he was being sent to is dreadful, dirty, inhuman, and an ongoing tragedy.
How's your dad doing? How's your dad doing?
Family members appeared somber as they arrived at federal court in Manhattan today in another attempt to get out on bail. The judge cited Diddy's history of violent temper and potential intimidation of witnesses as reasons for keeping him behind bars. Diddy's former protege, singer Aubrey O'Day, is celebrating Diddy's downfall today. I feel validated, a win for women all over the world.
Combs has pled not guilty.
Now, let's set the scene. It's late at night, and Diddy sends his assistant, David, along with a security guard named Deck, to pick up some takeout from Mel's Drive-In Diner in Los Angeles. Seems innocent enough, right? But as fate would have it, Suge Knight pulls up in his car at the exact same time. This wasn't just a random encounter, this was a meeting between 2 titans of the hip-hop world, both notorious for their rocky history, suddenly finding themselves in the same place.
Sean Diddy Combs back in a New York City courtroom, we believe right about now, as he tries to appeal a judge's ruling, which denied him bail and sent him to jail as he awaits trial in the explosive sex trafficking and racketeering case against him. Prosecutors describe a large criminal ring orchestrated by Combs to sexually abuse dozens of women. drugging them, beating them, and recording sexual acts for at least 15 years. The move from the judge to hold the musician mogul in jail before his trial comes as prosecutors argue Combs, his massive wealth, makes him a flight risk. And they're also accusing him of witness tampering, trying to keep both them, witnesses, and his victims silent. Combs' team offered a $50 million bond agreement, with his attorney claiming Combs is, in his words, eminently trustworthy. The judge didn't buy it. It is a stunning fall from the height of pop culture. Combs, however, is pleading not guilty and has denied any wrongdoing. Let's bring in NBC's Chloe Malas for more. And Chloe, there are no phones, no electronics allowed in court.
We actually have breaking news. We have some breaking news right now. According to NBC News, just moments ago, I am reading off my phone right now, Sean Diddy Combs will not be released. And this is per the district attorney's office. So let me explain and silence my phone and break down what exactly that means, or else my kids will call me during this entire segment. So this basically means, Tom, that now Sean Diddy Combs sits behind bars until this potentially goes to trial. Why do I say potentially? Even though his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, spoke to CNN last night and said that it is very unlikely that he would accept any sort of a plea deal. And we don't even know if a plea deal would even be on the table with these very extreme criminal charges of racketeering, transportation when it comes to prostitution and sex trafficking. We do know that this could be potentially a year behind bars. I was talking to NBC's legal analyst and correspondent Laura Jarrett earlier today. And, you know, there's so many motions and, so much discovery to do, as you know, and you've covered things like this, I'm sure, that it takes a while to get ready for a big criminal trial like this when there's so many charges and so many different grand jury subpoenas and things like that. So currently, though, he is in jail. And that's what it is. Everybody asks me the difference between jail and prison. You go to prison after you've been found guilty. Right now, he's in jail, and he's in jail in Brooklyn. And this is one of the main issues that his legal team had, was that this detention center in Brooklyn has seen suicides. It saw somebody get killed over the summer, food contamination, overcrowding, and they listed all of this in their filing to the judge. But clearly this federal judge was not persuaded, Tom. And so now that's it. He stays behind bars while he waits to have this tried in court.
Bonds claims that when Deke stepped out of the car, Suge did the same, and just like something out of a movie, the two men were face to face, exchanging tense words. Deke, realizing the seriousness of the situation, quickly called Diddy to inform him of what was happening. That's when things took a dramatic turn.
A celebrity, that's an understatement. He is an icon. And what are the chances that he gets any sort of preferential or royal treatment in the jail? Or, given the charges that are so significant and serious against him, is he going to be treated like any other inmate?
That's incredibly hard to say, right? When you see, and I don't want to generalize here, but when you do see, let's say, accusations against minors, which we don't see in this indictment. You can sometimes see some of these high-profile alleged criminals maybe put into solitary confinement. Will he be treated like any other inmate while he's in this detention center in Brooklyn? It's sort of left to be seen. I think that over the coming weeks, we'll see what happens and what types of motions that his team files, if they feel as though he is under immediate threat, or if he gets, beat up in prison or in jail. See, I made that mistake. If he gets beat up in jail, or if something like that happens, I guess maybe always things could change. I mean, look at Harvey Weinstein, for example. Not that I want to compare the two, but Harvey Weinstein has been been treated in a medical ward because he has all of these medical issues, right? And so the judge had decided even today that he can still stay in the medical ward. So again, I think it's a case-by-case basis, and we have to see how this all plays out. But let's just put it this way. Sean Diddy Combs is a billionaire. He achieved billionaire status in 2022. He is not going to be happy, Tom, being in jail. And this is a far cry from his multi-million-dollar homes all across this country. So obviously it's a huge fall from grace for somebody that was such a pioneer in the music industry.
Yeah, but to your point, Chloe, if it were you or me, not suggesting either one of us would ever face these kinds of charges, but there is no way we'd be out on bail or bond, right? I mean, these are incredibly serious charges that could land him in prison for years and years and years, and they involve violence, Not to mention...
According to Bonds, Diddy didn't hesitate. He quickly gathered what he needed to and drove his black Cadillac straight to the diner. Can you imagine? Here's Diddy, a man with millions at stake, heading straight into what could have been a dangerous confrontation. But before things could escalate, Deke managed to convince him to turn around and head back home. Talk about a close call.
You are a potential defendant in one of these cases and someone suing you. Would they typically require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed once they settle it with the plaintiff or the victim in this case?
You know, if I was an attorney representing one of these individuals accused, I would certainly request for that before agreeing to any out-of-court settlement. Otherwise, it kind of takes away the point of doing it out of court. It's going to end up being public. I might as well continue to fight the allegations.
And sometimes, Catherine, when you're a victim in human trafficking or sex crimes like this, money can't always satisfy you. And do you foresee any of these individuals, whether it's men or women, coming forward later, even though they've signed the NDA, even though they've been paid, saying, look, it was me and this is who did it?
Well, after you get paid,
right?
Okay, and you done spent that money, and then you got to take care of the I, the R, and the S, who are real pimps, then they're gonna talk. You know, what's done in the dark comes to the light. And who? I know you don't have a 50-foot bed in your backyard, do you?
Don't assume too much.
I'm just trying to tell you. But it's interesting because I was, you know, I've been following it, and today on TMZ, you know, it was stated that a celebrity that's bigger than P. Diddy, the Fed.
But this story doesn't end there. Bonds also shared another instance where Diddy and Suge reportedly crossed paths, this time at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Surprisingly, the two decided to keep things civil. They exchanged numbers and even discussed Suge's youth football outreach program. Who would have thought these two, known for their tense history, could sit down and have a conversation like that?
Denied his request for bail a second time, and the place where he's locked up now getting a lot of attention. The Metropolitan Detention Center, the only federal jail in New York City, is known for violence, poor conditions, and a string of celebrity detainees. And Diddy's attorneys want him out. NBC News' Yasmin Youssian has more.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going...
But don't let this moment of peace fool you. The tension between Diddy and Suge has been a recurring theme in hip-hop history. Bond's revelations come amid even more explosive claims that add even more layers to their complicated relationship.
Legal analyst is Michael Moore. Michael's with me now. Let's just deal with the, if you will, the logistics before we turn to the gravamen. The refusal of bail in these circumstances, bearing in mind he'd flown to New York to turn himself in, so he was preempted by the police. Are you surprised that he was refused bail?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the nature of these charges are so serious, the allegations are so serious that it's not surprising that this hearing he was denied bail. The judge has to look at things like whether or not he can be expected to return to court. Does he have the manner and means to perhaps evade law enforcement and not appear? Is he a flight risk, in other words? And so I think at this point, the judge has decided that the fact that he was doing these acts in secret did not obviously lend much to his statements that he will be open and available. So I'm not surprised at all. But again, we will see what the district judge now does since the case has been, or the decision has been at least appealed up, whether or not there are some terms of bail that might make the court comfortable that he will show up for court.
Now, turning to the charges themselves, they are amongst the most serious, which would involve very long periods of incarceration if convicted. But it also raises the question, if there was a plea deal at some point in the future, to plead down from these very serious charges, the lesser accepted offences would also be serious and could end up in prison.
I think any plea discussion of the case, because you have such significant impact on the victims of the case, would necessitate that he be sentenced to prison in some way. I just don't think that a judge would take and place him on probation or some type of house arrest given the allegations that were made, no matter what the plea discussions were. And remember, the prosecution and a defendant can negotiate a plea amongst themselves, but a court has the decision finally on whether or not to accept that recommendation, and ultimately has the authority to make a decision about whether or not a prison sentence is appropriate. We operate under the federal sentencing guidelines. Those give the judge some parameters to consider, things like whether or not somebody accepts responsibility, whether or not there have been an adverse impact on victims, whether or not there's been excessive fraud and deceit through the investigation of the case. Those things come into play as we talk about what might happen if there is a plea agreement that's ultimately reached.
It's important to remember, besides obviously he's innocent until proven guilty at the moment, but it's also important to remember that not being a nice person, being an unnice person, if you will, is not a crime. They're going to have to prove the elements of the offences in these cases. Just because he might not be likable is not enough to get you locked up.
Well, I mean, that's exactly...
Ex-LAPD Detective George Kading recently alleged that Diddy once ordered a $1 million hit on Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight back in 1995. This accusation isn't new, but every time it resurfaces, it reignites fresh debates about Tupac's unsolved murder and the dangerous rivalries that defined the 90s hip-hop scene.
Right to have his case tried in court, and the government has to prove that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The indictment, the allegations, we heard from the United States Attorney in New York, these are sordid details. They are particularly troubling as it relates to whether or not the allegations are true, on whether or not certain people, victims in the case, were given drugs at the time to get them to do these sex acts, whether or not there's been some effort to blackmail or extort or silence victims in the case by the use of videotaped, and to call it pornography would probably be too nice. I would just say dark type of pornography, it sounds like. These are things that a judge is going to have to consider as we go forward.
Finally, back to the logistics, if you will. He was prepared to turn himself in today, so we understand. The arrest removed from him the almost right to bail. Since I was going to turn myself in, I'm entitled to bail if I'd had turned myself in. By arresting him, the prosecution removed that possibility.
Well, they certainly removed the argument for him to make that he had turned himself in. It's mighty hard to, when you fly into town on a jet and you're there, to argue that there's no possible way you could be a flight risk. And that's one of the things the judge would consider. Another thing would be the nature of the charges, the allegations that were made. They spanned a long period of time. There were efforts to influence witnesses, it sounds like. At least that's been an allegation that has been made. These are all things that get put into that decision. The fact that he just would have turned himself in, that would have been in his favor. But there are so many other factors at play that it wouldn't have surprised me to see a court dig into those a little bit in making a decision whether bail would be appropriate. And at this stage, a judge has determined that bail is not appropriate. He has a right, and has done apparently so, to appeal that decision and have another hearing on it. At that time, his lawyers will have a chance to make these arguments about, the efforts that he was making to cooperate and to get there. The term cooperation, frankly, sometimes gets to be a little loosey-goosey.
And as if that weren't enough, Suge himself has added fuel to the fire. During his prison podcast, Collect Call with Suge Knight, he accused Diddy of being an FBI informant, claiming that it was an open secret in the industry.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going to mandate that they are responsible for your well-being, they have to ensure the safety of your well-being.
Occupy the streets until they get heat.
In the winter of 2019, protests over a power outage left inmates without light or heat for a week in the cold.
I understand how cold it must be in those cells, and not to have any electricity, any lights, and to not be able to communicate with your family is just inhumane.
The prison has about 1,200 detainees and is the only federal prison in the nation's largest city. The DOJ shut down New York City's other federal jail, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, back in 2021, 2 years after Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide there. A Bureau of Prisons spokesman telling NBC News they, quote, take seriously addressing the staffing and other challenges at MDC Brooklyn, adding the director appointed an urgent action team and they've increased staffing.
MDC has If true, this would be a massive revelation about one of the most influential figures in hip-hop.
Tremendous problems, and the problems aren't resolved.
Combs' lawyers originally hoping he could await trial under house arrest at his mansion, now arguing for him to be moved to a prison in New Jersey in the lead up to this trial, citing the prison's poor conditions, violence, and deaths. On Wednesday, his lawyer said he was being held in a special housing unit with an extra level of security.
Yasmin's back with us now. So what is next? Is he going to be in jail in this facility until the trial begins? Is there a chance he could, get moved earlier than that?
As of this moment, as of this hour, as of today, yes. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to be appealing this thing next to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn the judge's order here to try and get him actually released to his mansion on $50 million bail, wanting a GPS monitoring system, limited visits from family members, friends, so on and so forth. That is what they're proposing because of course, the violence I talked about in that piece inside these jail walls. They also, in the meantime, Hal, want to get him moved to a jail and/or prison in New Jersey. The judge so far has essentially said that is up to the Bureau of Prisons to make that decision. Nonetheless, it's all going to be on appeals leading up to the trial. His next court appearance, by the way, October 9th. So looking for that, of course, and any decisions coming out from the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on this order.